He's in just in time. Perfect. So our first story takes us to the air where Boeing and Airbus have differing opinions of where air cargo will be, I should say, in 20 years. I'd like them to be accurate about what it's going to be next year. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, definitely. Next year will be easier to predict probably than 20 years from now. But, it's never easy to predict these things.
A little bit about kind of the differing thoughts on what the market's going to look like, right? You've got Boeing saying one thing, Airbus saying another, and both of them are huge players. You see a ton of Boeing and Airbus, both freighter conversions and freighter new builds right now. So I would think that they were both betting big, but is that actually the case?
Yeah, I mean, they're both saying, the air cargo market's going to be continued on a steady and solid growth path for the next 20 years in their 20-year forecast. But Boeing's has a little rosier scenario. They see growth globally at 4.1% CAGR, annual growth. Over those 20 years, and Airbus is more conservative at 3.2%. So that's one difference between them, and then the other, and so that ends up reflecting in what their forecasts are for, how many freighter aircraft are ultimately going to be required, either that they build at the factory themselves or that come through conversions.
So does the predictions moving out towards 20 years, does this break with trends, or is this new trends, or is this kind of like, okay, this is pretty much what we would have expected given, everything?
It's pretty much on the same, I think they come out with these forecasts every year, every other year. And so, there's not huge differences, but, Boeing ticked up, I think last year they predicted 4% growth over 20 years. So now they're at 4.1%. Airbus, adjusted its forecast a little bit and also said, the interesting thing with Airbus is that they went into a little more detail, and for them, the big growth is in the express market. So they saw an increase, or they predicted an increase of 4.9% in express cargo, up from 4.7%, and then general cargo, everything else, is at 2.7% growth. So, that's kind of an increase on their end, even though overall they have a lower forecast. But and then they also said that the express market, which is about 17% of, represents about 17% of total air cargo volumes these days, will be up to a quarter, or 25% in 20 years. So that just shows you how e-commerce and the express market is really continuing to drive a lot of the growth, and why there's more interest in freighters of all kinds, especially the narrow body freighters like the 737s, 800s, and the new Airbus A321.
You said that their predictions were around, around 4%. They ticked it up like 0.1 or whatever it happened to be, right? And that doesn't seem like a huge amount. 4 to 4.9. Now there's a 25% change, which is significant. But so is this trend breaking from, or these predictions breaking from what their growth rate was previous to the last 2 years, or during the last 2 years? Is there a dramatic uptick or this renewed positivity, or is this down from where their growth was previous to our last 2 years of fun?
Yeah, no, it's like I said, it follows the same trend. Although Boeing's forecast, which so the forecast of air traffic, or cargo volume growth, like I said, kind of translates into how many freighters they estimate. So ultimately, they said the global freighter fleet among all airlines will be over 3,600 aircraft by 2041. So they envision about 2,800 new planes coming in to either replace older planes or for growth reasons. And so that'll bring the total fleet to about over 3,600. But that's an increase of 7% of freighter airframes from last year's prediction, and that kind of just reflects higher traffic growth and replacement needs.
Both Boeing and Airbus, was there any indication on how their 20-year predictions get factored with net zero climate goals or climate change goals, and kind of how they're building out their fleets or building out their strategy to either meet those goals or maybe set some new ones?
That's a good question. I think part of the factoring in on this, so these forecasts that we're talking about were part of broader forecasts for the airline industry or aviation overall. So they weren't just freighter forecasts. So they looked at global growth, GDP growth, global trade, and factored in all these factors, and then made these forecasts not only for freighters but for the passenger fleets. So for obviously there's many more planes being purchased on the passenger side. Yeah, I think they're both around 40,000 planes will be needed to support the fleet by 2041. So in that context of freighter and passenger aircraft, part of the reason for the demand for newer aircraft will be more sustainable aircraft, planes that have, burn a lot less fuel, like the 737 MAX -10, which is 20 to 30% better fuel economy than some of the older generation 737s. And so that will drive a lot of the replacement of these aircraft, and especially on the wide body side, that's whether it's a passenger or a freighter, that'll help deliver air cargo capacity as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's 34 years in the business. It's really hard to predict what's going to happen next year, or 2 years, or 3 years down the line, right? Why? What's the motivation of saying, hey, here's what's going to happen 20 years out?
I think it's just a roadmap for themselves and for the airline industry and maybe potential purchasers of their planes to go, hey, look, this is a strong market to be in. There's growth here. You can make money. So, why don't you buy one of our airplanes? So by putting these economic factors together and showing the trend lines, the purchasers of aircraft can go, that seems like a safe bet, and factor that into their, purchasing decisions when they see kind of the economic kind of outlook as being favorable.
So you report on, and we talk about a lot of these big commitments that carriers are making to either freighter conversions or purchasing new freighter builds. Is there any company that has come out and really surprised you with either the quantity of conversions or new builds that they're ordering, or the commitment that they're putting down, and kind of just how much capacity they're looking to add?
Well, the interesting thing is these forecasts were announced in the last few days, just ahead of the big Farnborough International Air Show in the UK, which is kind of I think it happens every couple of years, but it was canceled the last time for the pandemic. So it's the first one in 4 years, and it's where all the big, companies, all the companies and all the stakeholders and customers come together and check out the new technology and new equipment and talk about policies. And so, the interesting thing is there haven't been any cargo announcements. We're expecting some freighter deals to be announced by Airbus and Boeing, but none in the first 2 days of the show so far. But there's been a fair number of other deals, for passenger aircraft. But prior to this, I think, it's just interesting that Airbus, and with their new A350, large wide-body freighter, and Boeing with their next generation 777 are gaining customers. They, slowly, since they launched them at the start of the year. So everyone's watching kind of how that race will go.
Very interesting. Any other interesting news coming out of the show?
Not really from our perspective, but the Delta, did sign or formalized the deal for 100 737-10s. That's the largest of the MAX family. Then they signed or confirmed for 12 Airbus A220s. Those are like small regional jets from Airbus. All Nippon Airways confirmed it's going to take 2 of those next generation 777 freighters. They had ordered passenger versions, but converted 2 of them to freighters. So those are all some of those deals are pre-announced or signed as letters of intent before, and now have been formalized at Farnborough. There's been a lot of deals partnerships set up at Farnborough on sustainable aviation fuel, the partnerships on studying how to make fuels or alternative fuel technologies more widely available. So there's been a lot of announcements on those regards, but as far as freighter deals, none so far.
All right, Eric, exciting things coming out of the air cargo space right now. Thank you for joining us this morning. If people want to keep up with what you're writing, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, AmericanShipper.com, FreightWaves.com, main headlines, or go to the air section. Lots of stuff there.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Eric. You have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll be watching the skies for what's going on in air cargo. It's very, very interesting what the trends are right now.
Absolutely.
Coming out of this as we recover and move forward. Right now, let's toss it over to Donnie Gilbert and Tony Mulvey for our first carrier update.